Hi, I'm Janice from Treble Tree Music, and I'm a veteran music teacher, sharing some of the tricks in the trade that I have learned that have helped my teaching life be a little bit easier. I hope some of these tips will help you as well. Today, I'm going to be talking about building a successful elementary school choir. And whether you are already a new teacher or a veteran teacher, here are some tips that might help you to get started. Number one, overcoming recruitment challenges. This is a common mantra that I hear from every elementary, middle school, high school teacher. How can we get more people involved? Today, we're going to focus on just the elementary. Number one is organize some special assemblies or presentations and bring them to your school to generate some enthusiasm about choir. During regular music classes, you can ask choir members, if you already have a choir up and running, to talk about what they love about choir, and that's another incentive. And then the next is you need to tell them what is a choir. Not all children know what a choir is. I like to relate it to sports. It's a sports team. Everybody gets together, they work together, and we work as a team to create music. We meet after school or before school, depending on what time that the choir can be scheduled. And those are things you want to teach them about choir. When I talk about choir and its relationship to a sports team, I like to talk about it as a coach that leads all the kids together. They have games. Well, choir is the same. We're going to work together. We've got a coach. We've got learning new songs. And then we oftentimes will get on a bus and we'll go travel to another school and sing. We might sing with several other schools and festivals. So that's like a small competition, but it's not a win or a lose. It's a great experience, and to see what other choirs do and what other songs that they sing, plus meeting other kids that are just the same as they are, love to sing. Provide video examples of children's choirs and create a playlist that you can show them as examples, kids that are just standing quietly, and then others video examples of kids dancing, doing choreography, adding instruments. So those are the things that kids like to see. What are other choirs doing? What does it mean when I join the choir? What am I going to get to do? Promote field trips. Talk about places that you would like to go, where you've been, what it means, getting out of school, getting our choir t-shirts on, packing lunches, and having a great day singing with other kids. Kids love field trips. You want to promote honor choir opportunities. I was very lucky. The several schools that I've been in is that they have an honor choir that is sponsored by the local music teachers organization, or it might be sponsored by another school. And you can select your older students and give them something special, such as your fifth grade or your sixth grade students, give them something special to look forward to. Choose all of the kids that you can. If you have a lot of kids, you might have to do some kind of honor choir tryout, but we know how our kids sing when they are in our regular music classroom, so might not need to do any choir tryouts or honor choir tryouts. Another way to get kids excited is invite other choirs from other elementary schools to come and perform, and even maybe have a little day festival there where you're learning new songs together. And at the end of the day, both choirs sing for an assembly. Those are ways to really generate some interest. Here's a teacher tip. Be sure that you emphasize that all the choir welcomes all students. You don't have to have musical experience. You don't already have to be great at singing. Here's another way to learn how to sing better. Everyone is welcome. Tryouts or not to try out, I don't recommend them at the elementary level, and that's a personal preference of mine. You have to do what's right for you. I like all kids to be able to come and try out. We know in the music classroom when we're doing our regular classes, the kids that can and cannot sing, and they're going to show up for choir. And I would recommend just positioning them in front of your stronger singers. Maybe you have a strong singer on either side. If they have trouble finding their pitch by being around strong singers, they might develop into great singers later on, having that kind of support around them. Continue to talk about how to organize that choir. Make sure that you're thinking ahead of time, what grade levels are you going to use? Most years I would use fourth and fifth, and then I started adding in third, and that was a great, nice addition to our choir. The third graders could see the older kids. And then one year I had a second teacher, and we decided to invite second. Oh my goodness, the choir blew up. So then what we had to do is divide it into a second grade choir choir and a third, fourth, fifth choir, but be flexible. Think about ahead of time what grades you're going to invite. You're especially going to want to focus on those fifth graders. We want those fifth graders or sixth graders, if they're going into middle or junior high, to go on with their music. So really make sure you're showcasing them so they can be part of that recruitment process that the secondary likes to come down and participate in. Idea number 2 for building a successful elementary choir is to look for ways to promote parental involvement. You want to communicate to parents that there is something going on at the school or you're starting a new choir, send out newsletters, have parent meetings, maybe even an open house and invite parents to come and see the current choir, or you can even have a special meeting right after school. Send out rehearsal information, send out field trip potential locations, and the need for parent volunteers. You're really going to want volunteers for any of the field trips that you do, and I've got lots of tips on how to manage that as well. When parents feel involved, they are very much more supportive of any program we do at the elementary level. Number 3 in steps to building a more successful choir is before you even get started, think about how you're going to manage the rehearsal space. Do you already have a rehearsal space that you're going to be able to use? Is it in your music room? Will it need to be in another area in the school because your room is used after school? Think about starting it small. It could even be a corner of your music room. It could be maybe in the cafeteria after school. And then think long range and do some planning around that. As the choir grows, will they be able to stay in your room or does it need to move to another spot? For sure, doing some short and long range planning will take any anxiety on starting a new program or giving something else an expansion for what you already have in your choir. So give that some thought, have a cup of coffee, sit down, relax. You can do this. One of my ideas that I like to use is to have choral risers already set up in my music room, and I like to use them on a regular classroom basis because that gets them already practiced on how to get off and on risers as music programs come later in the year. It's an easier way to kind of see everybody, and they're sitting in a place that is more comfortable than on the floor. So consider that if you have something, like a choral risers that you can pull in. Of course, you're going to have to figure out whether or not your room has room for choral risers. I was lucky. I was in an old band room at my last position, and it had tons and tons of room, maybe a little too much to manage. Another way that you can organize the choir or even regular class students is to make sit spots, to organize seating in the classroom. I like sit spots. You can purchase them, but they always tend to come up. They'll pull them up. That's always a problem. So I found a way that when I made my own sit spots or you can even buy them and then tape them down with removable duct tape at the end of the year, it didn't bother the carpet or the floor. There's some that are really good for that. So think about that. I like to number my sit spots. I also like to color code my sit spots so I can use them for all grade levels. And some of the little ones, they sometimes might not remember their number, but they sure will remember their color. Well, let's say we get our choir going and now we want to organize and find some ways to organize the choir materials. If you're in an elementary school that already has a music folder cabinet, either for the bands or for anything else, you are really lucky. There are far and few between in elementary schools these days, mostly in the middle schools. You can make your own spots for where to put music folders. I like having folders. I like them to have something in their hands and to organize our music. So I gather up 3-ring binders and they're easy to order and find in colors, and I'll color code parts of the choir so everybody knows what color is sitting where. And the 3-ring binders, paper ones, you can just throw them away at the end of the year. I'll even put what group they're in on the front of their folder. I'll put their name on the front of the folder. I might even have pictures of animals on the folder so they know where they're supposed to sit. Paper choir folders are very inexpensive and easy to use. Well, if your choir ends up growing, which is a blessing, and you've got, let's say you've got 30, 40 kids, now you've got to manage all of the folders. And because we know that choir practice time is very, very short, we want to maximize our materials and getting them to the kids. So what I do, I recommend just getting after you've got some groups established in the choir, and I have this section, is that you'd have a section leader. We'll come back to that in a few minutes, and they would gather all the folders, put a rubber band around it, and then on their way out, put that bundle of folders in a bucket. And it can be by the door or by the back of the room, whatever makes it easier for you. That also gives those kids the responsibility of what to do with their folders. I also add an attendance sheet, and we'll talk a bit more about that. I use part of my seating chart sheet to cut that up and put it on the front of the leaders. Actually, I'll put it in a protective cover, and I'll give that to the leader of each section, and they can use a dry erase marker to mark attendance, and then put that with the rubber band. I can collect that at the end of the day and see at the end of rehearsal, and then know who's been there or who hasn't been there. That bucket of folders can be by the door as the choir comes in. I like to also just kind of toss them on the floor. They pick them up as they go, and everybody gets to their seat as quick as they can. I'll put the bundle of folders on the floor, not all of the individual folders. Here's another teacher tip. Put a pencil in each of the children's folders. Make them responsible for making marks, pencil marks, and teach them how to mark their music if needed. And then also have a can or a container with extra pencils. They get dull, they can trade it out, and then someone not during choir could sharpen those pencils. Number 5 in my ideas for building a successful elementary program is plan the rehearsal logistics. Here's another teacher tip. Organize for efficiency. Plan those rehearsals to really maximize student engagement and utilizing every minute effectively. If you take the time now, every minute will be used and everyone will know what to do. There won't be a wasted minute. Find a time that works. If you're starting a new choir, numbers may be low, but the program will grow. Don't give up. Explore some opportunities and times available with the principal and school staff. They all like to be involved in that decision process. Include them in your plans to create a collaborative atmosphere. Your staff will really appreciate you reaching out to them. How many times do you want the children to meet per week? Meeting once a week is common. For several years, I had the luxury of meeting my students twice a week, but the school grew too large, and then I had to back that up to once a week and give some of my rehearsal time up to my violin program, and I didn't mind at all. It was a great program. What time will work best for the choir rehearsals? What about morning before school? Could the kids walk to school? Could they be dropped off by their parents? Usually busing is a little bit tight, so that would be hard to have that choir rehearsal right before school unless there's some kind of all school events going on during that time. Is there a school day activity time? Some schools have built in a time where kids can rotate between activities. They have special events during that time of the day, probably knowing that they're a little bit on the tired side. Maybe choir could fit into that time slot once a week. If you're just getting started with a choir, could it be at lunchtime? Now, when I first got to my last school as an elementary music specialist, I had the kids come in at lunchtime and they brought their lunches, and that felt so special to them. Now, recess was right up against that clock after lunch, and so it was a very, very short rehearsal because the kids didn't want to miss recess. But you got to start somewhere. Could the choir meet after school? Planning your time, you need to figure out the travel time from the classroom, bringing their backpacks, jackets, picking up the folders, vocal warm, singing, and then dismissal. How long will that take? And figure that into your planning. After rehearsal, where will the children go? Is there after-school care, club activities, parent pickup, or other choices you need to take into consideration? Here's a teacher tip. As your choir grows, you may want to have a spreadsheet that has the kids' names on the sheet and tells you where they're going. Maybe they need to meet their parents at one side of the school. Maybe they're going to the after school care. Maybe they're going to a sport on campus, so that you know where they're going. And then if there's any question, you can answer that question. If a parent shows up at a time and they don't all of a sudden see their child, you know that they've gone to that sport they planned for. Number 6 is repertoire selection. That takes a lot of planning. You'll want to have that planned out for the year if at all possible. Choose appropriate and engaging music for elementary students. They love instruments. They love any kind of movement or choreography. We want to make sure that we're selecting songs from different genres, different cultural backgrounds, different languages. All of that is great in a choir. Check all the lyrics. Double check that you've checked all of the lyrics. Times have changed. Old songs that used to be appropriate are not appropriate anymore. You might need to change lyrics on a song. Do the deep dive. If there's any question, talk to somebody or colleagues, talk to somebody else. Don't just assume that all the lyrics for all of the songs, even in your curriculum right now, might be appropriate. Do that time and you'll save yourself any kind of concern. Use engaging arrangements. As I said, they love instruments, they love choreography. Check if it's boring for you, it's going to be boring for the kids. Although don't although don't look past the ones that seem kind of slow and meditative. Sometimes those are also hits for the children. Double check the arrangement, make sure it's interesting to you and the kids. All right, you've got your choir going, you're thinking of getting it going. Now what? Well, let's create some performance opportunities. School events are a great place to get started with showcasing your choir. It can be at a school assembly, holiday concert, or other special events. I love during the holidays walking my choir around the halls and singing, and everyone loves that. It really gets them into a holiday spirit, and even works for Halloween, being able to just sing some silly songs around the school. Look for ways to involve your choir in community events. Senior centers are a great place to go for a field trip. There might be other schools that are holding a special event and showcasing choirs. So look for those ways to create other opportunities. My favorite collaboration was with my high school choir when I took my elementary choir up to the high school for a concert and we sang a song together. My elementary choir sang a song by itself. It was a great event. Young students love to see the older students and participate with them. Create standalone concerts. You can create your own concert. I always like to have a concert right in the cafeteria during the day so that I could showcase my students to the parents and to the school right before we go to a festival. That's when they knew their music the best, and it was a nice way to rehearse all of the different pieces and parts. Here's another teacher tip. One year I took my choir caroling through the district office, and luckily the district office was right nearby, both for the holidays during December, and then I also did the holidays during Halloween. And the staff just loved being able to see those children singing and having fun. And it's always good to have this administrative offices at the highest level of your school district see what's going on around their schools. Plan some field trips. That's to your senior centers. It could also be to one of the festivals, and be sure that you're adding your parent, arranging for parent volunteers to participate with that. Some years we would do a festival, and then we might go by and see a zoo nearby. So you can also couple those field trips with other educational events and educational experiences. I love having parent volunteers for any of my field trips. The parents love participating and the students love having their parents come along. But one of the things you'll want to make sure is to organize your parent volunteers. Make sure it's really clear what their expectations are. Meet with them ahead of time of the field trip. You might even meet a separate day from the field trip. Make sure to assign parent volunteers to small groups, 4 to 5, and be sure and have their child in their individual group as well. Review the student expectations with those parents. What do you expect those students to do, and what the parents going to be responsible for? And outlining that ahead of time is really crucial. That have worked well with me, and I think they might work well with you. Review with the parents that the students are to be responsible at all times on a field trip. Number two, kindness to all students, especially from other schools. We want to give a good reaction and a good idea of what our school culture is all about. Make sure that they are respectful to all adults, whether they know them or not, as they're going through that festival or that field trip. Every adult is responsible for them on that field trip. And then be sure that they're reminded to be safe in all settings and make really good choices. Sheet from my parent volunteers that whenever we're moving from one area to another, getting on and off the bus, all they have to do is just do a quick check, make sure everyone is present and all are accounted for at every step of the field trip. Provide a name label for every volunteer. Oftentimes you can have that printed in the office. Your secretary, if you bring her some hot coffee or something a little sweet to eat, I'll bet she'd print those for you. Make sure it says what school they're from, how they want to be addressed, and then make sure that each of the students in that small group know the name of that volunteer. I'd like to create a success bag for my parent volunteers with emergency supplies and extra resources. I use a reusable plastic grocery bag, one of the ones that has a nice bottom on it, and then I'll put in that bag extra music or folders for a student. Once in a while, a folder will get lost and we need it during rehearsals. Band-aids, tissue, there's always a room for tissue, an extra t-shirt or whatever shirt that you're wearing as a choir. Also pack extra snacks and a bag lunch. Make sure the volunteer brings their own lunch. Oftentimes you can get bag lunches or sack lunches from your cafeteria for field trips. So I always recommend checking into that if you don't already know that. And make sure you bring a couple of extra water bottles. Singers get very thirsty very easily, so you want to make sure that they're hydrated. I oftentimes would just buy a case and have that on the bus and be ready to go, especially if we're doing a all-day choir festival. Whenever we're creating groups and events like this, it really does build a sense of community and culture in that choir. So I encourage you to look for ways to pair kids together for the field trips. Maybe they meet somebody different they don't already know. Might want to also include one of their best friends. Number 8 in building a successful elementary choir is building a positive choir culture. Look for ways to promote positive experiences while at the same time building a great sounding choir. Team building activities would be wonderful. Incorporate as many team building exercises to strengthen that bond among the choir students. Creating groups, as I mentioned before, is another great way, and also having class officers. Make sure there's a positive reinforcement in the choir. Recognize and celebrate individual and all choir achievements during rehearsals. For example, you could have choir student of the month, best leader, most improved, most inspirational. Any of those rewards would really help to build that bond in that elementary choir. Encourage peer support. Establish a culture of mutual support where older students are helping younger students, and the younger students feel comfortable asking the older students for help as well. Create group and individual leadership opportunities, and here's some ideas for building leadership in the elementary choir. Select and or create leaders in each of the different sections, and then provide a seating chart for them for each section. The section leaders can take attendance of their particular section. They could even reward their section if everyone gets there on time. You could copy the attendance sheet and insert it into a protective cover. They could use a dry erase marker to mark people that are there that day. And then you'd want to make sure that you can, it's a dry erase erasable, so that you can just clear that sheet at the end of rehearsal after you've recorded which students are not there at that rehearsal. The leader can then collect all of the choir folders, put the attendance sheet right on top, combine it with a rubber band, and make sure it goes to the section in the room where choir folders are supposed to go at the end of rehearsal. Give them that responsibility. Of course, you're going to have to step away and let them do it, and that's not always easy. Once the choir is dismissed, or you have another time during the day or the week, you can then grab the attendance sheets on the front of those choir folders. You can record in your documentation or your data sheet what days were missed, how many that they've missed. You'll want to track that, because once they've missed too many, maybe they aren't attending or they're not going to be coming back. And then you could also return those attendance sheets back into each folder. You could dry erase them, and have them ready to go again. Be sure to build in choir rehearsal rewards. I always had a bucket of candy for the end of every rehearsal. They were just the small Halloween candies, chocolate little pieces. I made them all the same, otherwise it was another problem. But you get those big bulk bags. I also would have non-chocolate candy, and one of the favorites and least expensive was those red vines, and that was a hit. Whenever I would have choir students stand up in the regular general music class while I'm recruiting choir members and ask them to talk about what they loved most about choir, the number one thing was the candy, and the second thing behind that was pizza after concerts and field trips. I also got a nice discount at the local pizza parlor. Be sure to sign up for email notifications. Check out my blog, TrebleTreeMusic.com, and it'll have resources where to buy the product, Building Your Successful Elementary Choir, which is parent forms, letters to explain why choirs are great, and then also seating charts that will help your leadership plan for how to take attendance and take that piece out of your planning. I know you can do it. Happy teaching. I'd love to hear from you and see what your ideas are and include them in our conversation. Have a great choir year.